having too many defensemen. I think that's probably the easiest route, and it's the most obvious one, which isn't always the thing with the Calgary Flames. We think something obvious is going to happen, and it never does. But having that many defensemen, Pat had talked about it on FlamesNation live this week. And I think Taryn Joe had also talked about it too. When I did a podcast with him, it's who's the obvious defenseman if you're going to move a defenseman right now? Like, Rob, who's the most obvious defenseman if you're moving a defenseman? Who's the most obvious one?
I don't know if there's really an obvious one right now.
Yeah.
If it were me, if we're talking about just this season alone, I think the guy would be Connor Mackey to move in a trade.
Fair, yeah.
He's 26 years old. He hasn't really got a shot in the NHL yet. I think Juuso Valimaki's upside is quite a bit higher than Mackey's upside. I think Valimaki's ceiling is still pretty high, just based off of what we've seen in his junior career and what he was doing before his injury. I don't think I'd want to trade any of the guys in the top 6 right now. I think that top 6 is loaded. I think it looks really good. If we're going to talk about trading, one of the big dogs on defense, I would think maybe next offseason, maybe looking at moving on from Chris Tanev, because he's getting up there in age. He's only got 1 year left on his contract. He's a right shot. We already have Rasmus Anderson, Mackenzie Weegar on the right side. And he's a little bit injury prone too. And he's getting up there in age. I think he's going to be about 34 years old by the time his contract's up. So maybe you could sell high on Chris Tanev next offseason. But for this season alone, I mean, if we had to move one defenseman out of that group of 10, mine would be Connor Mackey.
Sure. Noah, if we're moving a defenseman tomorrow, who are you moving?
Valimaki. That's the obvious one for me there, because I think the kid, like as Robert said too, like he's got a lot of upside still, but I think he just has gone through a lot of bad luck with the Flames, and I think he's in need of a fresh start. I think somewhere else. And if we were to talk big dog, Noah Hanifin.
Right. I think everyone's putting that by default. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's the one that if you were to make a trade tomorrow for defenseman, that's the one that's going to fetch you the most in return, right? Valimaki, I think, will do decent. I mean, it depends if you bundle things up, right? Like if you package a defenseman with somebody, who knows, man? What we like to think that we know what Brad Treliving is going to do, but we literally have no idea. We don't know. The writing's on the wall with the defenseman. There's no way that all these guys are going to be able to have a roster spot. A lot of these guys aren't going to be a concern on waivers, right? Like Malosh, Gilbert, whatever. They're not going to be a concern. Because Valimaki does have to pass through waivers. If I'm correct on that one, he's got to pass through waivers. Yeah. So do you risk losing him on waivers if you know that he's not going to make the team this year? It's tough, man. It's a tough one to figure out. Because and
I think losing Valimaki for nothing would be quite worse. Like, I'm not saying you're going to be fetching like something very valuable for Valimaki, but at least you're going to get something back for him if you trade him rather than risk losing him on waivers.
Yeah, fair point. What do you think, Rob?
I was just kind of thinking about this. So say the Flames lose Juuso Valimaki. I think the only Calgary Flames first round draft pick on the team would be Michael Backlund, because Monty's gone, Ben's gone, Shuck's gone, Valley would be gone, and then Pelletier, Zary haven't made the team yet. So would Michael Backlund be the only first round pick that the Flames drafted on this roster if they lose Valimaki? I don't know why I was just thinking about that. It's kind of interesting, but
that is interesting, man, especially up in the north in Edmonton where they have so many first round picks for theirs playing. I mean, we don't ever want to compare to those guys, but that's a really good point, man. I mean, we've got a lot of first rounders that aren't, from the Flames system, but that's a good point, man. I think,
for sure,
Pike made a really good point that Valimaki's had some extremely hard luck. Like, it's not like the injuries did not help. You guys got to remember that. Remember when we threw him in the lineup against, even though the series sucked, against Colorado, he actually looked pretty good. Yeah, he looked really good. And then went on into injury and then just couldn't recover. And, he's got to adjust to the Sutter system, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if they're ready to give up on him yet, but it's just, is he your 7th defenseman? Right. That's the thing. Like, cause
I just remember the talk going into 1920 was that he was going to be like in the starting lineup opening night. Like, I remember that being the exact talk around Juuso. And then when he suffered that injury, like, that was just devastating to hear. Like, it was just like, man, this guy just has some very poor luck at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't give up on him yet. No, but it'll be really interesting to see where the battle in camp goes. And it's coming up so fast.